Take Jordan Maxwell, for example. The water of life. Jordan, of course, is a river. And it provided the water of life for many people over in the Middle East. It's a very sacred river, a very honored river. And of course, Maxwell means maximum and well. Well contains the water of life within the arid deserts of humanity. So therefore, Jordan Maxwell means the deepest well of wisdom. And today, he is going to allow us to drink from that cup which he provides us.
Because if you lie one time, you're just a liar. And consequently, your testimony is of no value, period. But there are two kinds of facts, the kind you look up and the kind you make up.
But I was being exposed at a very early age to the really totally dark side, a side of the occult world that most people don't even want to think about. I woke up one night, in the middle of the night, and I went totally ballistic. When I woke up, there was an entity in the room, and it was, I cannot tell you how evil the presence was to my spirit. Whatever it was that was in my room was so profoundly evil. So I started having, for a lack of a better term, otherworld experiences at a very early age, going out of my body. That was a whole off-the-wall experience, too, at 8 years old, 9 years old. One night when I was a small child, my dog woke up at about 5 o'clock in the morning. I woke up, my dog was howling and barking, and, of course, waking up the neighborhood. And my dad yelled, go quiet that dog. And I knew that there was something bad because the dog was going out of its mind. And so I ran out to the back porch, and I'm telling you, the dog had cornered between my backyard fence and my dad's garage. It had cornered a Tyrannosaurus Rex, a little small, about 2 foot high, or I would estimate about 2 foot high, full developed dinosaur. I actually, with my own eyes, saw 6 pterodactyls in Los Angeles back in I would say probably 1980, 81, and I saw this little black dot, and it was almost not perceptible, and then I watched it because it seemed to be coming my way. This thing was flat out moving, and it was a huge pterodactyl. It was enormous in size, and it was moving at an extraordinary rate of speed. And on Saturday morning, I was in a restaurant back in '59, and there was a young little girl sitting next to me, and I started a conversation, and so we became very good friends. So one night she came over and knocked on my door, and she said, my dad wants to talk to you. So I went with her, and I knew with an immediacy that this was a very special man. And then, just very nonchalantly, he said to me, he said, remember when you were about 10 years old, 8 years old, something like that, back in Florida, and remember how your dad built a new back porch? The old back porch was falling apart, and you were talking to God that night, and you asked God to let you do something important with your life? He said, remember that? I know that because we were there. We saw you. We've been watching you for a long time. We brought you here. We're the reason why you're here. And we're going to use you to do something later on in your life. And we're going to train you and prepare you for what you're going to do for us. He said, but I'm going to give you a book that's going to begin your journey for you. And I want you to take the book and read it, and it's going to begin a life for you and where you're going to go and what you're going to do ultimately later in your life. But I remember him distinctly saying, don't worry about where you're to live, what you're to do. Just go on with your life. We will guide you. We will decide what you're going to do and what you won't do. We brought you here. And I'm just standing there looking at him, and he says, come in, I want to give you the book. And he did. And the book was the complete works of Charles Fort. Anyway, when I was in Hawaii, my wife and I went to Hawaii with some friends back in the 80s, and we're sitting in a restaurant, and I had my back to the door, and someone came in to the restaurant. I didn't see them, but immediately there was an electrical shock went through my body. And in my head, I was hearing, get up and run quick. You're in trouble. Your life is in danger. Run. And I got up and I ran across the restaurant, the restaurant, and I ran to the kitchen, and the voice kept saying, run, get out of here quick. Your life is in danger. And it said, run around to the front side of the ocean side of the hotel. I ran all the way around to the ocean side, and then the voice said, you're all right now. You're safe. Sit down. You're okay. I was down in San Diego working for the Truth Seeker Company in the mid-'90s. I woke up, and there was an angel. All I can tell you is it was a typical, what you would vision an angel to be, with huge, beautiful wings glowing, but I could not see the face very well, and I realized the moment I saw it, it was neither male nor female. Instantly, I knew that. Mm-hmm. But it was a very powerful presence, a glowing kind of angel, for the lack of a better description. And it had a sword in his hand. It had a sword, but the blade was fire. It was burnt. You could hear the crackling fire, and the sword was pointed at my face. And so when I woke up, I saw the sword, which was actually the blade was fire, but it was pointing exactly at my face.
Oh, I'd yell too.
And I jumped up and yelled and jumped up, and my heart was pounding. And it stood there for a moment. It pulled the sword up, straight up over to its face, straight up, and it just stood there looking at me, and then it began to quickly disappear.
Helena Petrovna Blavatsky?
Right.
Yes, I have all of her works.
You have?
Yes.
Well, that's why, yes.
I think her best work was Isis Unveiled, Part 2, which is theology.
Right. Science.
And that was an exceptional work. I think that Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the Russian mystic, was a very wise and perceptive lady, and she had some very profound knowledge, obviously, and her academic achievements were extraordinary, and so I have a very high respect for the work of Helena Blavatsky.
A year before Hitler's birth, one of the occult doctrines that would foreshadow Nazism was spelled out for the whole world in an unlikely place by an unlikely writer. Living in London is a Russian aristocrat turned best-selling author named Madame Helena Blavatsky. In more than 1,000 pages, Blavatsky rewrites the history of the world, from the creation to the present. Her story is based on unconventional sources: Babylonian astrology, Egyptian hieroglyphics, and a mishmash of the occult.
Gerald Massey, one of the greatest Egyptologists that ever lived. In what we would call the white man's system, which is a Druidic, Northern European religio-political economic system, for 1,000 years before the Roman Empire, Western Europe, Scandinavia, Britain, was what we might call the white establishment on the earth. And one of the most important priesthoods in that ancient establishment were the Druids. And the Druids had a very important symbol that they used that we still have today. It was a magic wand. Many of the Druid priests used magic wands, like Merlin the magician with his magic wand. Magic wands were always made out of the wood of a holly tree. It was made out of Hollywood. And they're still working their magic on us in Hollywood today. This is where the word comes from. And Rabbi Marvin S. Antelman, some 35 years ago, Marvin Antelman, A-N-T-E-L-M-A-N-N, Marvin Antelman of Newton, Massachusetts, was 35 years ago president of the American Rabbinical Association. And he and I were very close friends for many years. And I used to chide him all the time about his understandings of the Bible. But Rabbi Antelman, president of the American Rabbinical Association, I used to talk with a rabbi who was the president of the American Rabbinical Association back in the mid-60s. He lived in Newton, Massachusetts, and he was the president of all American rabbis. And he and I used to sit for hours and talk. And I asked him once, Rabbi, tell me the truth. You're not talking to a fool now, you're talking to me. Tell me the truth. Was there a King Solomon and a King David? I'd like to pay tribute to three people who have influenced my life greatly. Probably the most impressive man I have ever personally known and has impacted my life was Mr. Manly Palmer Hall. Manly P. Hall, if you do not know, was one of the most brilliant spiritual men that I have ever even read about. And so I want to pay tribute to Mr. Hall. I'm very honored to have in the audience Sir Lawrence Gardner. I have been impressed with his brilliance and his work, and I'm delighted to have him in my audience. Carry on, Lawrence.
He said, but I'm going to give you a book that's going to begin your journey for you. And I want you to take the book and read it, and it's going to begin a life for you and where you're going to go and what you're going to do ultimately later in your life. But I remember him distinctly saying, don't worry about where you're to live, what you're to do. Just go on with your life. We will guide you. We will decide what you're going to do and what you won't do. We brought you here. And I'm just standing there looking at him, and he says, come in, I want to give you the book. And he did. And the book was the complete works of Charles Fort.
So I grew up hearing this kind of conversation, and my grandfather was a senator, my great-grandfather was a congressman. I have two living uncles today who are federal judges. So I grew up around hearing this type of conversation in the family about intrigue and politics and the behind-the-scenes stuff going on in world religion. At the ripe old age of 17, I decided that I wanted to find out if there was a bottom to this issue. And I began my research and study into theology and all of the arcane or occult theologies of the world. I was fascinated by some of the most powerful movements in the world. My mother had an uncle who worked in the Vatican, Secretary of State's office. And about every 3 or 4 years, he'd come back to the country to visit the family. And as a little kid, I would sit and listen to this brilliant gentleman talking about international intrigue, politics at the highest levels. And he was quite knowledgeable working in the Vatican Secretary of State's office. And the things he would talk about, the secret societies, the money that was made throughout the world internationally, the politics, and generally the entire world scheme of things, how politics and religion work together behind the scenes. So I grew up hearing this kind of conversation. My mother had an uncle who worked in the Vatican Secretary of State's office when I was a child. I had two federal judges. My mother had two federal judges as uncles that I grew up with in my hometown. My great-grandfather was a senator from the state of Florida. I have that kind of stuff in my blood. I've always realized that there's a whole system going on here. All I'm asking the public to do is do a little research. See if what I'm saying is wrong and judge for yourself. Because in the ancient Egyptian religion, the most powerful divine being in all of Egypt was Osiris. And Osiris said that the gods who came from the star system of Osiris, or the star system of Sirius, came to this earth. This was the teachings of the ancient Egyptians, that the gods, aliens if you please, came from another world called Sirius, and they came here and set up a divine arrangement. And Osiris said that the gods who came from the star system of Osiris, are the star system of Sirius. As I said, he was called the risen Savior. The name of the sun had different names, different times in history of the Egyptian Empire. When the sun came up in the morning, he was known as the newborn sun. His name was Horus, Horus. One of the names in the ancient Greek for Horus was Iosis. In Greek, Horus was Iosis. Jesus, according to the reference works for thousands of years, is the Son. So I'm saying that there were 16, including Christianity, 16 major cultures of the world had the same identical story, which is called astrotheology, with all of those little stories, that I went through. Now, whether there was an actual man named Jesus or not, I don't know. I wasn't there. But what I do know from 43 years of studying this one subject is that there were 15 other cultures that had the same identical story. And then when you find out Abram, A-B-R-A-M, as the rabbi, I was going to give his name, as the rabbi said to me, Abraham's first name was actually Abram, A-B-R-A-M, because in the ancient Hebrew, A-B, Ab, is father. And Ram, R-A-M, is Aries, the ram. The constellation of the ram is Aries, the ram. This is why when Moses comes down from the mountain with the 10 Commandments, and he sees the children, you begin to look up the word kingdom, and it is a root word for zodiac. So what the master teacher, the enlightened one, was telling us is that let thy kingdom, the zodiological, astrological complication of the heavens, is the kingdom of God. They encountered a Palestinian god, the planet Saturn. Saturn was the god of the Palestinians. Still is. His name was El, E-L, okay? El was the name of the planet Saturn. Elohim is not the word God. El is a Phoenician, Canaanite name or word for deity, El, E-L. We talked a little bit about that last week. Go back and read the 10 Commandments. You'll find out, first of all, there's 2 different renditions of the 10 Commandments in Genesis. One says one thing, one says the other. This is precisely what Mother Church was designed to do some 1600 years ago by Constantine, Emperor of Rome, in the city of Nicaea, France. Emperor Constantine called together all of the magic practicing priests of the Roman Empire. Because Genesis comes from Gen Isis. Gen is the word for generation, to generate something. Where it begins is to generate. Isis in Egypt was female wisdom. You put the 2 together and it becomes Gen Isis or Genesis. When you take Isis, I-S, Amun-Re, Ra, R-A, and the new god Saturn, El, it becomes Israel. Israel is Isis, Ra, and El. The 3 names of the ancient gods of the ancient world. Israel is Isis, Amun-Ra, and El. And never realized the very word Lord, L-O-R-D, comes from L-A-R-D. Lord. And why is L-A-R-D, Lord? Is grease. Grease is oil. Oil is Christos. And in the Greek language, Christos is where Pillsbury gets a cooking oil called Crisco. Now, let me throw this in real quick. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in 1948, In 1947, 1 year before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, there was another set of scrolls found that very few people know about. They're called the Nag Hammadi, N-A-G, Nag Hammadi manuscripts. The Nag Hammadi manuscripts were found in Egypt in a little town called Nag Hammadi. And today there are huge reference books in the big bookstores. Go in there and ask for the books on the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, and you will find that 1 year before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, in the Qumran community, which is up in what we call the Holy Land, in Egypt, in a little town called Nag Hammadi, a huge group of manuscripts were found. And in those manuscripts, they know by the writings and by all the surrounding evidence that those Nag Hammadi manuscripts were at least 200 years before Jesus would have been born. And it was in Egypt, not the Holy Land. And the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, 200 years before Jesus would have been born, talks about Jesus. He walked the earth, he did this, he healed the sick, he raised the dead, he was this, he was that, and it has all these strange stories about Jesus as a child. As a matter of fact, the Buddhists today, a very ancient priesthood, far in excess of Christianity, existed in the Himalayan mountains, where the Buddhists have a religious leader called the Dalai Lama. Dalai comes from the Latin word meaning God. Dalai, God. Lama. A lama is like a lamb. A lama is a lamb. Therefore, the word Dalai Lama is God's lamb that takes away the sins of the world. It's a very old and widespread concept.
As really feels strange being back on the radio again, because I haven't done radio in about 7 years. We brought you here to do something. That's why you're here in Los Angeles. We have brought you here. And we're going to use you to do something later on in your life. And we're going to train you and prepare you for what you're going to do for us. And I said, what do you mean do for you? He said, well, you did at 8 years old ask God to let you do something, didn't you? And I said, yeah, but I was just a child. He said, no. You asked God to do something, and it was your request. So now we're going to let you do something, because you did ask for it, you know.
And I said to them, I said, look, I know you're here, okay? And I want you to know that I don't mind doing whatever it is I'm supposed to do. If I've got a destiny in life or a mission or whatever it is, I don't mind doing it. But if it has something to do with you, then I'm going to ask you for 2 favors. Do not abduct me, because I don't want to go anywhere. And don't frighten me in my bedroom. I don't want to wake up and find something in my bedroom I can't handle, okay? So don't mess with me, don't scare me to death, and I don't want to go anywhere. But if I'm supposed to do something, if there's a divine plan of some sort where I'm supposed to play, then open the doors, show me what I am to do, and leave me alone.